Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight, Ben joining me back at the helm, and we are on episode 278 talking about emergency preparedness. And I guess what spurred this a little bit on my end of things, and this is Ben's episode, so I'm going to let him come into it, but for me, there's a lot going on out your way. You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff going on the western side of the province. And there's definitely some emergency situations that are potentially brewing.
For sure. Not too long ago, I heard about a bridge near Truro that had washed out, leaving some residents more or less stranded. Jasper in Alberta, where I was in the last week or so, it just got evacuated, and they're moving people from BC and Alberta, trying to get them out of the area. I think that was 25,000 people evacuated, 15,000 visitors, and 10,000 people. If I have those numbers off, people, just let me know. But yeah, and the question was raised, I think, on a Reddit forum I was on, where somebody said they were concerned about what about the people that are in the woods right now?
And that's the thing. And we've run into situations not nearly as dire as an evacuation situation, but we have run into the problem where we've been in the woods before and come out to different types of emergencies we didn't plan on going in. And one I was talking to you about was during all the gas shortages. Kind of snuck into the woods, knew there was going to be a little bit of a problem, spent a little too much time there, came out to every gas station in my neck of the woods is literally out of gas, which created a little bit of a problem, seeing I had to travel to get home.
And exactly that happened to us quite a few years ago now, but we were in Keji, and we went in, I think me and the wife, we had done a 2 or 3 night trip on our not our bikes, on our kayaks. And when we came out, we loaded the kayaks out and started driving out. We hit the first gas station, and the pumps were closed. And I was like, that's really weird, but no big deal. I got some gas. And we managed to get to our cabin, and we started listening to the radio, and we found out that I believe the province had to turn away a tanker full of fuel because the quality wasn't what they expected it. And then I think there might have been damage to a refinery in the area, and that also meant that there was a major fuel shortage for Nova Scotia, which meant we were actually concerned whether we had enough fuel to get home.
Which is a real fear when you're not planning for it.
Which we did, in fact, have managed to do, so it turned out to be okay. But I mean, like you said, it is a real fear. It's a real concern. You have decided that you're going to go somewhere, you do something, and when you come out, say you go in, you have X amount of fuel, and you're like, I got enough to get to the gas station when I get out, and then you get out and there is no gas station.
Which is exactly where I fell in.
Yeah. So my theory now is, if you're going away for a few days and you don't know what you're going to come back to, try to have as full a tank when you get back as possible.
And that's where I'm at. I don't go in the woods anymore unless I have enough to get me to where I'm going and at least home. I never go in with the assumption that, I'll hit the gas station on the way out, because just in case there's no gas. For whatever reason, it may not be like a big disaster. It may just be that gas station is closed for the day for maintenance. They might have had software issues. Who knows? It doesn't take much to really screw up a plan, is what I got to thinking about the last time this happened to me.
Well, I mean, a power outage alone. It happens, right?
Absolutely. And actually, that's another thing that we've experienced, not in the last few years, but previously. Mel and I had been in the woods and came home to the power out. Didn't know. I mean, you're in the woods, no power there. You have no idea.
Yeah, and the other thing I've experienced too, fortunately it didn't affect us at the time, but we came out and a local bridge had washed out. Fortunately, it wasn't in the direction we were going in, but it got me thinking at the time, these things can happen where you go into an area and when you come out, there is no exit. Maybe you can't get home, even if you can get somewhere. And you kind of have to be prepared in case something goes wrong. In the clue, like back to the Jasper people, if somebody is backwoods camping when that evacuation order went out, and they probably wouldn't know anything about it until they get back to their car. when, if they're lucky, the car is still there and there's a note on it telling them that there was an evacuation. Otherwise, they may not discover it until they hit Jasper and find that the entire place is deserted, and maybe there's a cop there that will explain to them what's on the go, or maybe there's absolutely no one. We don't know.
And you know what? I guess where I'm going on my part of this is what's some of the stuff we can do to try and alleviate some of those problems. And before we go too far into it, I kind of wanted to throw the big ones that people are going to roll their eyes at right out of the way. And the first one, of course, is to let somebody know where you're going and inform you, text you, or something like that if something happens. So naturally here, I get my neighbors. I say, hey, look, I'm going to be just away from home for the next 5 days. Can you keep an eye on things? I'm not expecting anybody to come in. So if you see somebody banging around my house, poke your head over, see what's going on. Maybe somebody is looking for me, but I'm not expecting it. On the flip side of that is if the power goes out or there's a major disaster, and that's what I tell them now, is if there's a major disaster, kind of jokingly but not joking, shoot me a text. At least I'll get it when I get cell phone reception. Just don't leave me in the dark.
Yes. And I think that's important. Some kind of messenger service or ability, a text, an email, once you get cell phone service, which for a lot of my last week, I was out of cell phone service. So we didn't hear about a lot of these fires and stuff until we were actually on our way home from a week of camping. We didn't hear much news while we were out. The few radio stations I was able to tune in for the few minutes we were driving didn't give us much information about what's going on.
And that's actually kind of surprising because that's what I was going to bring up as my next point. If you don't have anybody to contact you that way, first thing I do when I hop in the trucks, I tune into the local radio station. So get familiar with the local radio stations. Find out which one is generally your news, like CBC or whatever happens to be over here. Even like 94.1 and 97.9 here in Nova Scotia, they generally have news every 30 minutes to some degree, recapping. So that'll at least bring you up on any major event because if there is something major, generally, they mention that on the radio. Apparently not always in your case, Ben, which, I mean, it is what it is. But generally, they tend to mention that. I remember when the gas was out down here, and it was like on the radio every 15 minutes. Like, people, please don't go to the gas stations. There is no gas. You'll be informed when there's more kind of dealios, you know?
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, that, like I said, that's one of the things I thought. Even when I did get internet, I checked Facebook because usually oftentimes things poke up there, but you really have no control over that feed. So if it's not a popular feed at the time you're checking, you may not get that feedback. So reliable sources of news are important. Unfortunately, in the mountains where we were very limited in the radio stations we could get. And it was only when we were really close to town they seemed to work. Similarly, there's areas in Newfoundland when I was growing up, you could not get radio for large sections, which was odd to me because you could always get radio in my hometown, which I thought was pretty remote, but there are more remote things.
I remember when I was younger, there was a lot more areas where it didn't get radio coverage. I find now that as I'm older and probably has more radio stations and stuff.
Now, that being said, satellite radio. A lot of cars and people have satellite radios. You can get that. And then satellite communication devices. The InReach we've mentioned, the Spot. I think the new iPhones have a system. Motorola has the Defy system. These systems will allow you to send and receive messages. And like you said, if there's something major going on in the world, hopefully somebody will reach out to you and give you a heads up that, hey, the area you're in is being evacuated. You should head home now. Right?
And I mean, that is literally as simple as asking your neighbor, a friend, a relative, whatever is, hey, I'm disappearing for a few days. Text me any major events. It seems like a no-brainer, but you'd be surprised how many people just, I let them know we're going camping, which is great, but they may not think, oh, hey, they're camping, maybe I should flip them a text, because they're probably trying to figure out what to do on their own. You know what I mean? For whatever the emergency happens to be. So if you straight up tell them, hey, if there's a major event of some sort, just let me know, that kind of resonates in their memory. So actually saying the words has a huge impact on that.
And you never know when a forest fire would happen, and maybe your place is at risk or the area you're in is at risk, and there's something you could do about it. The other thing is, the prepping. Now, we're not preppers per se, but it never hurts to have a bit of spare fuel, some extra camping gear set up. So I always have extra fuel for my camp stoves. I try to keep some propane for my barbecue and stuff, because if I do lose power, if I do lose a lot of my regular resources, I have an out, a way to heat water, to cook some food, um, and that sort of thing. Uh,
Excuse me. So we have Jacob DeFord here in the comments. I keep a battery-powered weather radio in my backpack or in my pack for backup, which is a great idea provided you're in an area where it has coverage. Now I have, and don't get me wrong, this is not a dedicated weather radio. I have a lot of those two-way radios that I just keep up here on my shelf whenever we're going out doing big, search and rescues with the fire department or just camping in large groups, whatever. And they have the weather channels in them, 1 through 7. And I have frequently turned those weather channels on scan to see if anything would come in. And I think maybe less than I can count on my fingers, at least where I am from here in Nova Scotia, that I have gotten anything meaningful on those weather radios. Now, that's not to say a proper weather radio, maybe it would pick up more. I don't know. I don't have a lot of experience. I definitely encourage anybody that does have a little experience with that, reach out to us and kind of let you know your thoughts. What have you had any real experience with them, Ben, other than just like the old Cobra weather station kind of dealies?
Not extensively. Um, we have a few of those devices laying around. They do say they have access to the weather station, but it hasn't been something we generally tune into. And I have been in areas where I have tried and it's not given me much. But no, I think those are great tools. And in fact, those same radios, those two-way radios, it's surprising when you can get somebody on those. So we took them in different places and turned them on. I think my wife had an interesting conversation with a lady who turns it on just to entertain her kid. And she likes to talk to strangers on the radio. So sometimes it's a way of getting news. There may be someone else camping in the area that have one on, and they may just turn it on to see. So it may be a chance to communicate with people somewhat local. I mean, they have decent range in the right conditions. Some of these you can go 32 kilometers, I think the box says, or 64. Now, that's line of sight, so you kind of need.
That's like hilltop to hilltop with nothing in between.
Yeah, but if you do have trouble getting signal climbing up to the highest point, you might be surprised who you can get. So no, that's definitely a good method.
I just did something to go. Oh yeah, CB radios. It was a big thing around here, which go in your vehicle. You can get handheld ones, but I know locally, we run on channel 21, which. I don't know who sets these channels. I just heard it third hand. Like, I am not a massive CB ham radio enthusiast at all. I know a little bit about them enough just to kind of keep up with a basic conversation. But I used to have a CB in one of my pickup trucks when I used to bang around in the backwoods. And Channel 21 was the local. And I mean, literally at 7 o'clock in the evening, the grandmothers and stuff used to get on and start sharing recipes. Like, everybody used this channel, and it was great for a long time. But then it seems like that has now faded away a little bit. Unfortunately, it's one of the things I really miss is just hearing those old stories and stuff that would come across here, because these people could literally just be telling stories. But if you went on channel 21 and keyed up, chances are you would get somebody. At least something you could, or someone you could reach out to get some basic information. Like, hey, I'm in the woods around this area, send help. Or, hey, I'm just coming out of the woods, I can't get a hold of anyone. Is there something I should know about?
Yeah. In fact, I am looking at getting myself one of the VHF radios to throw in my car. You can pick up some relatively cheap ones, I think Bofang or something. And that may be the solution for one of my problems. And I've met up with a few people that use them in the roads, and they swear by them. It's a good way to communicate. I did find even those, the range was not what we expected, but it helps. There's better antennas you can get. There's different setups you can go with. But yeah, communication is key, especially when you don't know what's on the go and you don't know where to go. The other thing is apps. I know we've kind of talked about communication, but some apps allow you to download maps, and some apps will allow you to do different things in an emergency. And these backroads maps means if you're coming out and you can't find your way out, and you've downloaded these maps or have paper maps with the roads, you may find that the road you meant to come back, maybe there was a small landslide, maybe there's some trees that fell down, maybe there's a fire. We don't know what's obstructing you, but maybe you can't go out the way you came in or the way you expected to, and you may have to backtrack.
I was going to say Google Maps, and, no preference to anything out there. Whatever map you folks use is absolutely great, but I do have the experience with Google Maps. When I was working for Natural Resources and we had any major fires, they generally had a map overlay that would have that information on it. And the first time you key up, it'd be like this red overlay, and it'd be like active fire front, which as a firefighter at the time, I thought was incredibly neat. You know what I mean? We got to see the fire spread day to day. I don't know how accurate it was, but at least it's better than nothing. Now, if you're in the woods and you catch that information, at least you know there's a fire and which direction it's heading in. You know what I mean?
100%. And that's kind of where I was going with that is sometimes these things will give you the heads up that you need when you're trying to get out. And that's useful. So these ones that allow you to download some of this information will update when you get signal, because I don't know how many times I've been places where I've picked up signal where I did not expect to.
Absolutely.
Right?
And generally it's like on the crest of a hill or something. Even going through the backwoods, as we said, getting up high will sometimes give you better signal. I'll find even like going through old logging roads and stuff like that, once you hit a crest of a hill, you'll magically get with a bar. You may not be able to make a good, solid phone call, but you can send texts and you can do some basic internet browsing. Now, I wouldn't go on YouTube and try and stream something unless it's the Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Shameless plug. But you would actually be able to jump on like Messenger or something like that and send out a few messages and get some information across. You know what I mean?
Yeah, little known fact, our podcast downloads where no other podcast will.
Dictated by self-study, not accurately or scientifically proven.
Exactly.
Yeah, and there's a couple other things. Like even just coming home to not a disaster, but to something unexpected, like a power outage and stuff like that. Before I go in the woods, much like you were saying there, Ben, we're not preppers, but it doesn't hurt to have some things prepared. Do you have to go to the extreme end? No, but is it nice to have a can of gas floating around? Maybe a couple bottles of water. Depending on how long we're going, sometimes we'll fill the bathtub. That way, if we do come home and the power's out, we have some water that we can either use for cooking or whatever, or at the bare minimum flushing the toilet, depending on how long the power's going to be out. Because those of you that don't live on town water know what I mean, but those of you that may be in a city or on town facilities, when you folks lose power, generally you still have pressure in the system. You may not have hot water, but you can generally still run your taps, flush toilet, things like that. Those of us on wells, we're not so lucky. Without the pump being able to provide that water pressure, second you hit the toilet, that is every bit of water you have going straight down the drain, literally.
Yeah. Yeah, what else? I think that's definitely some of it. Definitely communication, definitely have backup plans. So if before you even go in, take a look at the areas you're going to and make sure that, you have an alternate way out or at least a concept. And, some roads are one-way roads, like not one-way, they're just dead-end roads. And so the area you're going in, you're going to have to come back out. But what if that road is blocked? What if there's a fire to prevent you? Have an idea of how you might get out. And it may be, I'm going to have to walk 20 kilometers in a direction I wasn't planning on to the next road, and I'm going to have to leave my vehicle. But that may be the solution, right? Maybe have a plan of where you would leave your vehicle in that case, so that when you get back, it's most likely going to be safe and available. So there's, don't leave it in a heavily wooded, dry area. Try to leave it in an open field. Try to leave it in a spot where the fire would be less likely to go, if that's the reason you can't get out or whatnot. The other thing, making sure you carry a saw.
Yeah, and we don't just mean like a handsaw or a buck saw, which is good, don't get me wrong. We strongly advocate for those, but generally in the back of my truck, once again, depending how far I'm going into the woods, I throw the chainsaw on back with a little bit of oil, a little bit of gas, Hopefully it's still there when I come out. But worst case yet, if just a tree blows over the road, like nothing
Yep.
but a little wind. There was a widowmaker I didn't see on the way in. I go to come back out. Now there's this big tree laying in the middle of the road. It is so easy just to start the chainsaw, cut the tree and move it and go through, than to have to try and buck that thing up with an axe or a handsaw or something like that.
Yeah. I've long thought about an electric chainsaw would be almost perfect for that. Little battery powered one, the cordless chainsaws, whatever they call them. Something like that. Right now, I don't have one of those. I actually take cordless reciprocating saw with the large pruning blade. That'll go through a surprising amount pretty quick. It's not a chainsaw. It doesn't replace the chainsaw, but it will help me get, you know, separate a tree from its stump and maybe help me get out of the way. Um,
Oh, absolutely. Red Bear Tactical, I use GIA maps for fire information. I'm not sure what GIA is. I'm familiar with GIS. Is that what you mean, Red Bear?
Gaia.
Gaia? Oh, Gaia. Okay, gotcha. Sorry. I was thinking GIS, which is another mapping tool that we use, or I shouldn't say we, I don't work for them anymore, but that was used with natural resources, and it's literally for like doing layers and fire layers and stuff like that. Great program if you know how to use it. But Gaia, so that's another mapping software. I think we talked about that in the past, haven't we, Ben? You have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a popular one, especially with off-roaders, overlanders, those style people. There's Onyx now. There's a few others. Do your research. Test them out for the areas. I've been playing with a bunch of them over the years, and some of them I find like exceptionally good in some areas and a little weak in other areas. So figure out where you're going. Figure out what ones have the best mapping for the area. Um, it's hard to go wrong with Google, but it doesn't have the best back road maps, to be honest with you. And that's where the other options go. Here in BC, a lot of people are using the Backroads Map atlas or books,
Mm-hmm.
and you can get those for Nova Scotia. I had the hard copy versions of those, and I
I
have
got
hard
one floating
copies.
around here. It's the ATV
Yeah,
Trails of Nova Scotia or something like that somewhere.
and I have the hard copies for here too. But the nice thing about the online maps is they're updated regularly. So if there's a new road installed or if there's been something changed about a road, you get that feedback. Where paper copies, although they last a long time and you don't have to worry about batteries and stuff, they could go. Um, Something I've been thinking about, and I'll quickly mention this as a concept, these solar generators. Um, they're basically a UPS that you can hook up to a solar panel
Okay, yeah,
instead of
I know what
having,
you're talking about now. Yep.
right? Um, I see people using them for charging their phone, running it in different electronic devices, laptops, cell phones, drones, refrigerators, things like that. They definitely give you the ability to run a few things in an emergency, and they don't take up a ridiculous amount of room, and they're a little bit quieter than a gas generator. Gas generators, especially a small portable one, you know, when you get out, you may need them, but a lot of them will allow you to charge up your battery in your vehicle should something go wrong. And I keep a booster pack in both my bike and my car. And so one of them I switch back and forth depending on what I'm doing. But it allows me to boost either vehicle should the battery go dead. Because it's happened to me with my van. It's happened to me with my bike. Someone comes along and hits something, the light comes on and it dies. Or maybe I turn the key too far and it goes into park mode. You know what I'm talking about?
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Come out after work and your bike's dead. Well, being able to boost that quickly. Same thing can happen in your woods. Something may happen to drain your battery, and you need to get out. It's not easy to call for somebody way back. And
And
if
even if
you're
it was
way
easy,
back,
how are they going to get there is the other thing. Like, you barely found the place on your own. Are you going to try and describe how to get there over a phone to somebody that's never been in the area before? Because that's generally who's coming out. Not that these are bad people, good intentions, just don't know the area.
well, and I did a trip a couple weeks, and they said if you break down on this trip, it could cost thousands to get your car out because tow truck companies don't want to go back there.
Makes sense. I mean, it's a liability to them.
So what did we do? We took spare gas. We took the booster packs. We took a full-size spare tire. We took the stuff and some basic tools that you could do some quick repairs should you need to. And those things I think are very important to have that bit of tools and knowledge. And I found out that even on that trip, one of the people I was with had a spare set of brakes should that be needed.
A spare set of brakes.
She had extra pads.
Makes sense. I mean, you were telling me about some of the places you went, and it was fairly hilly terrain. I mean, that makes sense.
Well, and I thought I was having a brake issue. Some rock or something got caught in my pads and was making a lot of noise, and it seemed to be getting seized. I managed to function them a few times, and it went away, and I never had any more problems for the rest of the trip. But I had a period where I was very concerned I might have to stop and take the tires off. Last week when I was camping, similar deal. A lot of heavy hills, an overly full vehicle. I noticed my brakes were running really hot. I had to take the tires off and check my brakes to make sure that they were good because I was concerned.
And that's not a bad idea, too. Like, just knowing where you're going, it's... And we've said this in the past, so I won't beat a dead horse. Know where you're going, know what the limitations are of where you're going and what you have with you. Let's see. Red Bear, my wife used our Arc 3 solar generator to run her CPAP machine. And that's another thing. Like, excuse me, as I have to prove a point. They're great for running things like that, too, that just make your stay more comfortable at night. It's not always about emergency stuff, though that's nice to be prepared for, too, don't misunderstand. But just having that nicety of having your CPAP, because I know my mother-in-law, she can't sleep without it. Like, just straight up cannot sleep without it. I'm supposed to use one, and I kind of intermittently go between and using it and not using it, because I can't stand the feel of something touching my face. And they told me, oh, hey, you'll get used to it. 6 months later, I'm still having massive migraines. Didn't really get used to it, but I still try to force myself to use it from time to time. But her, on the other hand, like, she just does not sleep without it. If she doesn't have a CPAP machine, she's just awake. So that would mean the difference for some people of getting out there and actually enjoying a trip, or just getting out there and grueling through a trip.
Yeah, for sure.
Honestly, I think that's kind of where I was with most of what we wanted to talk about here tonight. We
Yeah.
are coming up on our 28 minutes anywho, so we are hitting that new time zone in there. And on the new time zone, I'll ramble a slight bit on this. It does seem like our algorithm, for lack of a better term, I have no idea. It seems like more people are tuning in for longer. It's not that they're tuning in for longer, it's that the episodes are shorter, they're listening to it more appropriately, it's driving our rankings back up. I don't know. So far it seems to be working. I think it's one of those things we'll shoot for a half-hour episode, but if we hit an episode that tends to take a little more than a half hour, we're just going to roll with it anyway like we normally do. You know what I mean? We'll shoot for a half hour, but we're not going to put ourselves in a box. That's my 2 cents on this, Ben, and I haven't actually talked to you about it yet because I totally forgot to. But what's your thoughts on that while we're live so people know?
Yeah, I think we'll keep trying it. We talked about the digital campfire. It still hasn't happened, so if somebody wants the more rambly versions of us, that might be the option to get that.
Absolutely, and we do have enough people to do that, and thank you for reminding me. We should send an email and see if we can get everybody together on one of these Saturdays. And or whatever day happens to work, and let's do that because I think it'll be a ton of fun. I'm still on board. It kind of got backburnered like it has for a while. I know we've been talking about it for ages and it hasn't happened, but I do have enough people for it now. Between me and Ben and 3 other people, that's 5. That was the minimum I wanted to go in on this with. I think we can finally make it happen.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll keep trying this for a while. Get our ratings back up. We were for a while, I think. When you went online, we often came up as number 1 or number 2 in the world. Last I checked, we were like number 4.
We're still in the top 10, but we're not in the top 3 for a lot of places. Some places we are, some places we're not. I just don't like the different averages.
Yeah, 100%, right? I got to check it out while we're online.
Actually, it's been a while since I looked. Since we changed the algorithm or the episode length, whatever you want to talk about. I'm using those words interchangeably, and I probably shouldn't. Somebody out there is probably groaning with me and my lack of knowledge, and I apologize. But yeah, it is what it is. So where are we sitting now, Ben?
The best top 5 Bushcraft podcast of 2023. We were number 3, under Ask Paul Kirtley and Jack Mountain Bushcraft podcast. We were above the Bracken Outdoor podcast and above the Canadian Bushcraft podcast. Sorry, Canadian.
Funny enough, and don't get us wrong, folks, we are not harking on any of these podcasts. We strongly recommend that you go out and try them all. There is no shortage of information out there. And hopefully these folks are on the same mindset as we are. It's all about the learning and sharing of knowledge, so we don't belittle anyone out there. Go check out their podcasts. I've listened to some of them myself. They're pretty good.
I went under Player FM.
Yep.
And we actually showed up as the first thing they referenced 13 days ago. And then it's Jack Mountain podcast, and then In the Bush podcast, then Bracken Outdoor podcast, and then Revere Nature podcast, Barefoot podcast, Nature Alliance, and the Practical Woodsman.
I've actually listened to the Practical Woodsman. I actually enjoy that one. I'm not even going to lie.
So,
any case, we're still in the top 10. Like I said, maybe some of this has affected it going up. I have no idea. Anyway, that's a discussion for another day. For tonight, I think we kind of rounded up what we want to talk about here tonight, the time we had, and we could talk about it more, but I think we're just going to start repeating and it's going to get rambly. What's your thoughts, Ben?
The feed spot has us on number 5, so.
That's unacceptable.
Unacceptable. You guys got to work with us, get us back up there. Thank you, everyone, for listening. As we always say, get out there, have fun. Love to hear how it's going for you guys. I know I have some interesting things coming up, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure you do too, Robert. So, yeah.
So, on that note, before we go, actually starting Friday at 3 o'clock, I'm on vacation. And I can't wait to see where that takes me.
Nice. Okay. Well, we'll hear about it when you get back.
Night, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Night all.